Hey guys, this is David at the Woodcraft store here in Spokane. I'm the assistant manager for the store, and today we're going to talk about bandsaws. Specifically, we're going to go over some of the features and some basic tune-up on them. We'll do a couple of cuts just so you can kind of see what you're in for. I've got two machines with me here. These two represent probably the most popular size or class, if you will, of bandsaw. You can get them in a very wide range. Bandsaws are one of those tools that, can you live without it? Sure. But you're going to find a whole lot of projects that you like doing that work really well with the bandsaw. They do great for working with small pieces. You can do resaw work with them where you take bigger, heavier timbers and cut them down into smaller chunks to make them more manageable. There's just a lot of different things you can do with them. So they can become a very indispensable part of your shop. And everybody works on a budget. Everybody's got, what they're interested in, what they need. And the great thing about bandsaws is you can get these machines in a very wide range of sizes. You can get them to fit just about whatever budget you're after. As I said, these two represent probably one of the most popular classes. These are both considered a 14-inch bandsaw. That measurement comes from the size of the wheels here. These are a 14-inch diameter wheel. You can find them as 10-inch bandsaws, 18-inch bandsaws, and you can get into some of the really big industrial ones that are 24 and 36-inch diameter wheels. You need an entirely different power setup to run those monsters, though. The bandsaw is a relatively simple machine. You have an upper and lower wheel. The lower wheel has the motor behind it. These two wheels work together to drive this blade here. And if I open this up, you can see that a little easier as well. So they work to drive this blade here. And this blade is a single piece of metal that is wrapped between those two wheels. And that's what it looks like when it's not on the machine. The cutting direction on these machines means that the teeth on these, the points of the teeth, should always be facing down as you're working it. So you're going to have the teeth facing down.
What is better, more teeth or less teeth?
So the question is, what is better, more teeth or less teeth? And the answer is both and neither. It depends entirely on the type of work that you're doing. Fewer teeth, as you reduce the number of teeth, the teeth get larger and they get more aggressive. You're going to be able to remove more material, but you're going to have a much rougher cut. Lots of teeth, the teeth get smaller and smaller. As the teeth get smaller, they're not going to be as aggressive. You're not going to be able to remove material as quickly, but you are going to have a finer cut. In that regard, they're very similar to table saw blades. The fewer teeth you've got, the more aggressive it gets. The more teeth you have, the finer the cut is. A lot of people will use blades that only have a few teeth to do resaw work. A resaw is taking a board and splitting it in half this direction. Now, if you're used to working with a table saw, then you're very familiar with working with a board this direction. You can rip it down its length. You can cross-cut it across its width. Bandsaws also have the option of cutting a board this direction, and you can actually split it down its length this way. Great thing about doing that is that if you go out and you buy the lumber yourself, you could buy buy 2-inch or 3-inch thick material and then cut it down to whatever thickness you actually need. The cost on the boards can be a little bit higher, but the more you pay somebody to mill a board for you, the more cost you're building into that individual board. So bandsaws give you the option to actually split one of these open and make your own thicknesses. So we've got our upper and lower wheels here. The wheels are constructed out of different materials depending on the size and the quality of the machine. Smaller machines or less expensive machines will usually use aluminum wheels. The higher quality and larger saws will generally use cast iron wheels. This one here and this one are both running cast iron wheels. And usually if you feel along the back side, like right behind here, you'll end up feeling a couple of holes, if you will, where they've drilled the casting to balance these wheels for you. Do we have any other questions at the moment?
Not at the moment. Nope. No, we're good. Nobody's asked any questions yet.
Okay, so we haven't gotten any questions yet. That's cool. The lower wheel, as I said, down here is the drive wheel. You have the blade itself. In back behind here, you have the a screw and spring assembly. This setup back here is used to control the tension on the blade. It's also used to control how the wheel pitches forwards and backwards. And that will become important when we start actually doing the tune-up on this. And I'll show you what it does. This one is pretty much set up, just about ready to go already. You know, as I'm sitting here spinning it, the blade is moving vertically up and down. It's not trying to slide forward or backwards on the wheel. So for rough purposes, that's kind of where I want it to be. The crank here on the side controls the blade guard. Use that to raise and lower the blade guard. For safety's sake, you want this guard down close to the piece that you're working with. If you're doing a really shallow cut, you're working with the board and it's nice and flat, you want to bring the guard down close to it. That way you don't have a lot of blade exposed. Having the guard way up high while you're making a cut like this just gives more opportunity for something to go wrong, gives you more room for you to come in contact with the blade. Bandsaws over the years have used several different systems to help guide the blade. The two most common systems right now, one is a bearing system, which is what this one is using. It has several ball bearings that are positioned around both the blade above the table and below the table. And these help control the blade from moving back and forth in a cut. The other style that's very common is a guide block system.
I'm going to zoom in on that for you.
Okay. So the guide blocks, instead of having the blade slide between 2 points that are moving, the guide blocks have 4 points of contact around the blade, both top and bottom, but 4 points of contact that help control the blade. The guide blocks are a piece that will need to be replaced eventually, and you can buy replacements either from the manufacturer or some of the machines will take aftermarket replacements. replacements. Both systems have, if you will, their pros and cons, and there's a lot of personal opinion about what most of that is, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. I'd like to give you some information, not start a war. And then a lot of the bandsaws have their own, if you will, unique features. This one, for instance, is one of the few machines out there that has a actual brake on it. You usually find this only on some of the really large bandsaws, but there is actually a foot brake here that is connected to the motor. So when you stomp on this, it shuts the power to the motor, and it acts very similar to the brake on a bicycle, so that it slows the wheel down. Without that brake system, this thing can sit there and run. As it winds down, you've turned the power off. It can sit there and run for 30 seconds to a minute easily before that blade will actually come to a stop. This one here is one of the few where it may be difficult to see. There is a pulley assembly back here that actually allows this machine to run at 2 different speeds. You can slow this machine down for doing soft metals, aluminum, brass, things like that. Or you can go ahead and run it at its normal speed for woodworking purposes. So, as I said, this one is relatively close to set up already. We have our bearings in here in close to the position where they need to be. This one could be tightened up a little bit more, but we're pretty close to set on this one. Yes?
Question. On the new Rikon 14-inch Deluxe, they took a patent out, I believe, and they have a easy tuning ability with those bearings. But on most bandsaws that I know that you own and I own, it's all done differently.
That's very true. So the question or the comment was about the blade, the tune-up system on these. Rikon and a couple of other brands have finally figured out that using an Allen wrench and constantly keeping track of an Allen wrench to change out the blade setup is a real pain in the neck, considering how often you may have to make these changes. So this one uses bearings, and these bearings are on a spring-loaded mount. So when the tension is off, the bearings want to open up, and then I can press on them to actually drive that bearing close to where I want it to be, and then just use a thumb screw here in the front to actually tighten it up and hold it in place. So it makes the tune-up process that we're going to go through much faster.
Yeah, I can see that it could take like 3 minutes as opposed to 20 that it used to take me.
Yeah, the time saving is critical, is significant, especially if you're working on a project where you're constantly having to change the blades back and forth. The Laguna, which we're actually going to go through and set up, this is the machine that is going to be living in our classroom, and this is going to be its very first use. This machine has been plugged in, it's been turned on. I know that it actually runs, but we've never cut anything with it yet. So y'all get to see its maiden voyage and its maiden tune-up. So the blade that I've got here for it is a 1/2-inch blade. It's 4 teeth per inch. So for a bandsaw, this is a relatively general purpose kind of blade. I'm going to be able to use this blade for doing crosscuts, for doing some ripping, or for doing crosscuts and ripping cuts, and I'm going to be able to use it for some resaw work. Now the reason I say some resaw is that these teeth are still not real big. So if I'm working a very tall board, say more than 6 inches, the space between these teeth is easily going to fill up. and then instead of cutting, it's just going to start trying to burn its way through. So this is going to be good for some small scale resaw. And I'll show you a blade later that's really good for doing larger, heavier resaw work. So, as I said with these machines, you always want the teeth on the cutting side, you want the teeth pointed down. So we're going to take the throat plate out of this machine. And our table stop. This blade wraps in here and then around the side, and then we wrap it up onto the tires, top and bottom.
Is this an easier saw to replace the blade in?
This saw is fairly easy to replace the blade in. I do find the Rikon to be a little bit easier. Part of that is personal preference and experience. I actually own that model saw, so I'm very familiar with using it. But this is a fairly easy machine to set up as well. So we're going to take up a lot of the slack that's in this. Right now the wheel is all the way at its bottom position. So we're going to sit here and take some of the slack off this machine.
Do you need me to hum or sing or anything like that in between your turning, or are you pretty much done?
No humming or singing is necessary on this one.
All right, I'm just here for you.
One feature that a lot of them have that is available back here on the back side of the machine is a quick tension release system. These systems are designed so that, you know, on this machine in this position, the tension is completely off, and then I can pick up on that to actually put tension on the machine. Once we have the bandsaw tuned up, this is a nice feature to have, because if you're not going to be using the saw for an extended period of time, it's always nice to just take the tension off. Some of the blades, some of the less expensive blades, will actually develop a memory spot in the blade itself. When you turn it back on, you will actually be able to hear it, and it can affect your cut. And it's just a nice thing to be able to do, to just quickly take the tension off, and then when you're ready to use it again, just put the tension back on. And you won't have to do any other adjustments to it.
Does the Rikon also have that on the back?
The Rikon also has that feature on the back. On the Rikon, instead of it being a lever that drops down this way, it's actually a lever that moves back and forth across here.
Fantastic.
This one I actually like a little bit more, because when this is tensioned off, you can see this lever and you can see for sure that that thing is in the down position, and therefore it's going to block what you're doing. It's going to mess up anything you try and do. It's very obvious that the tension is off. I've actually turned mine on not realizing the tension was off, and that was a somewhat frightening experience. Front, stay. So, back the tension back off. Wow, that moves a lot more than I was expecting. Wowzers. That really moves a lot more than I was expecting it to. There we go. Now we finally got that all the way up. Okay, taut. Very taunt. So we're actually going to try and take some of that back off. Now, all of these bandsaws, no matter what size you have, come with a little gauge built inside here to try and give you an idea of the correct tension that a blade should be under. Take these gauges with a large grain of salt.
How big?
A very large grain of salt. And that's not to say that the gauges themselves are a poor design. The problem is that if I take this blade off and I put another brand on here, this particular blade is a Starrett. If I was to take this blade off and put a Timberwolf brand blade or Laguna's own blades on here, the tension that it requires to bring this thing to a nice taut location, if you will, is going to vary because the blades themselves are made out of different metals. So use that as a rough guide. And for instance, I've backed it down just now because that gauge was positioned all the way up where it thinks a 3/4 inch blade would be and nearly into the red zone. So I'm just assuming that I've got a little too much tension on it at the moment.
Question. Over a period of use, do blades slowly stretch and lengthen after?
That's a good question. He was asking whether or not blades can stretch out a bit. Quite frankly, I don't know.
Fair enough.
I haven't noticed any of my blades that have seemed to do that, but I don't know.
What are the different quality of blades you can purchase here at Woodcraft Spokane?
There's two main styles of blades that you can purchase at Woodcraft. We carry 3 or 4 different brands. We carry the Starrett blades, we carry Timberwolf, we carry Laguna. The Starretts are a very good general purpose blade. The Timberwolves are a little bit better quality blade. It's a difference in the steel in the blade that they use. They tend to run at a lower tension. So where this is, reading well into the 1/2 inch mark, if I was to put a Timberwolf up here, it would probably be sitting closer to the 3/8. They just don't require the same tension level. The Lagunas are on par, equal with, if you will, the Timberwolves. They're a very good quality blade. But there are two main categories of blades. What we have on here right now and what the Rikon comes with are a steel blade. These are essentially cut out of a single sheet, and then the teeth are sharpened up and they have a little bit of an offset to them. But they're all cut out of basically a single piece of metal. The other style of blade are the Carbide Blades. Maybe we should have unwrapped this one before we started. Bombs away!
You can just talk about it.
So let's see if I can get this plastic covering off of here enough to show. Okay, there we go. There we go. All right. So you can see here, this is what's called a carbide tipped blade. So like a table saw blade, it has a steel backer, and then it has carbide tipped teeth actually brazed to the front of it. Unfortunately, these aren't ones really that you can resharpen most of the time. And the carbide blades are significantly more expensive than the just stamped steel or straight steel blades. But their cut quality is far superior, and they have a much longer lifespan to them. Whereas most of the steel blades are going to run you in the $20 to $40 range, carbide tipped blades like that are going to run you in the $150 to $200 range.
do you do with the blade after you took it? You took it off. What are some of the ideas?
When I'm done with a blade, it's probably headed to a scrap heap. You can take and get them, take and recycle them or whatnot. I had a creative individual who mentioned one idea was to turn it into a paper cutter. Take the blade, mount it onto something stiff, and use it as a way to cut large sheets of butcher block paper or something.
Sandpaper.
Or sandpaper, yep, or sandpaper, there you go. I suppose you could take and cut them into short strips and drill holes in them and use them as a cheap hacksaw blade. So we've got this thing on here, and it's fairly tight. One question that I always get is, how do you know if it's tight enough? Well, there's two things that I've always done. One is you probably won't be able to hear it.
Oh yeah, they will. Wait, I'm using my shotgun mic. Hold on, folks. That's what these are for. And go.
So when you flick it, it's not a clean sound really here. If we go up in tension just a little bit, let me get the guard the rest of the way out of the way too. So, see, that doesn't really sound right. So we're going to tweak just a little bit more. And you can usually do that, and you'll find a point where it's a fairly clean sound, is what I've noticed. There we go. Now we're a little closer. So that's one method. It kind of makes sense to me. I usually use it. It works fairly well. It doesn't make sense to everybody though. The most common version of a measurement test that I've ever seen is a deflection test. So right now, I've got this thing up here. I've got it sitting on a 1-inch mark. If I can push on that blade and get it to deflect more than a quarter of an inch.
Accidentally spun the camera around and they saw me for a second.
That was just our cameraman, don't worry about it.
My fingers are getting fat for this iPhone.
So if you can basically press on that, and I'm not pressing hard, I'm just giving it a little bit of tension, but if you can press on that and get it to deflect more than about a quarter of an inch or so, it's not tight enough yet. So that's kind of that's the deflection test, is just to set that up there. So we've got it at a good tension, and so I'm going to bring this back down. And go ahead and zoom in on the guide itself.
You got it.
So right now we can see there is a lot of space between these contact points and the blade itself. And I don't want all that space. So we're going to take and loosen up our thumb screws, and we're going to slide these in until we're about a dollar bill's worth of space in between here. Now this is not going to show up on camera. I doubt you can zoom in close enough for this to show up. But I can tell that my blade is not well positioned on the wheel as I'm trying to adjust to these, because on this side, the blade is trying to contact these guide points at the front, and on this side, it's trying to contact at the back. So the blade is literally twisted on its, is twisted over. So we're going to take the tension off here. Oh, see, now it's so loose that it's not doing anything. So we're going to get just a little bit of tension on there. All right. Now I've got enough tension where the blade is actually moving. So as I sit here and spin it, what I'm looking for is where the blade is riding on this upper wheel. And at the moment, it seems to be trying to stay pretty much in the center of the wheel. But it didn't do that until I started rolling the wheel around. I'm going to put the tension back on all the way and see what happens. As you change the tension, the blade gets twisted, it gets, pressure put on it in different places, and it may start to change where it's riding on the wheel. In this one's case, it started drifting forward towards the front of the wheel. Now, I'm going to loosen up the screw on the back and try and tilt the wheel just a little bit so that it brings the blade back into the center of it. And this is another thing that is a little bit of personal preference. A lot of people have different ideas about where the blade should be sitting. Some people like having the blade riding forward on the wheel. Some people like having the blade riding in the middle. Some of them like having it riding towards the back. My own personal preference is right in the center. In this case, it also means that where my guides are down here, my contact points are going to be a lot more consistent. I don't have any big gaps front to back. I can actually pull the blade, I can pull the guides in a little more consistently. One thing you want to do with all of these is you want your guides to be behind the teeth themselves. You don't want the guides actually riding in front of the teeth. These teeth all have a slight offset to them. And so you'll do one of two things if you have the guides actually covering the teeth. You'll either damage the guides or you'll end up damaging the blade. So give it another spin here a couple of times. Yep, so we've got tension on the blade. We've got our guides pretty close to where we want them on the top. Let me step down here for just a second and do the ones on the bottom. pretty much good to go at this point. We're going to close this fella up. I'm going to lower the blade guard all the way down. There we go. We're going to put this little jobber back in here. Because this little thing on the side, a lot of time, bandsaw tables always have a split in them. This little thing that I just put back in on the side is meant to hold the table nice and smooth so that you don't have two pieces trying to twist. Crunch. We're closed up. There we go. All right. Here we go. Nice, clean sounding. I don't hear anything hitting the guides. I don't hear any scrapes or noises coming from the blades. Now, so we are in good shape there.
That's David using the foot brake.
That's David using the foot brake. So, I've got a block here that I've made some simple lines on to do a quick couple of cuts. We realized the other day we needed a new door stop for one of our back doors, so we're going to make a real quick and simple door stop. All right, so let's see here. Nice clean cut, but if you were to look close, it is a little rough. This is not a smooth cut. Again, easy, quick. Use our little hook right here. Quick and simple, couple of cuts. Easy to do. These are, doing rip and cross cuts on pieces like these is great for a bandsaw. We're able to do them with no muss, no fuss. Obviously you could do these cuts on a table saw easily as well. You would just be thinking a little bit more about how to arrange pieces around so that you're nice and safe with the table saw. I'm going to pick the guide up a little bit. And tighten that back up. All right. And for that one, we use the emergency stop. So, there we go. Now we have a door stop. Yay. So, do we have any other questions on utilizing the bandsaw, some of the cuts it can do and whatnot?
Nope, I think people are enjoying watching, and no questions at this point.
Okay, well, then I hope everybody has enjoyed our little bandsaw demonstration today, and have a great afternoon.